Rick Sanchez had crashed into a lot of universes. Universes made of lava. Universes run by fascist squirrels. Universes where everyone talked in rhymes and executed you if you missed a syllable. But crashing into the ocean? That was new. The portal snapped open beneath the surface of the water without so much as a ripple, glowing green and defiant against every known rule of fluid dynamics. From it burst Rick's battered spaceship, spiraling wildly before slamming straight into the sandy streets of Bikini Bottom. The impact sent coral storefronts wobbling, jellyfish scattering, and a mailbox screaming in terror as it tipped over. The ship hissed, smoked, then sparked violently. Rick kicked open the hatch and fell face first into the sand. He coughed, spat out seawater, and pushed himself up on one elbow. "Fantastic," he muttered. "Just perfect." He looked around. Buildings shaped like pineapples, Easter Island heads, and giant rocks. Roads that curved for no reason, a sky that was somehow still blue underwater. Fish people walked casually past the wreckage, barely reacting, some stopping only to point, laugh, or sell snacks. Rick blinked. No pressure crush. No oxygen deprivation. Light behaving like it's on antidepressants. He reached for his flask, took a long swig, then stood up. "This isn't a planet," Rick said aloud. "This is a punchline." Before he could pull out his scanner, a high-pitched voice exploded directly behind him. "Wowee! Are you a new neighbor, or a time traveler, or a wizard, or a neighboring time-traveling wizard?" Rick flinched. He turned slowly. Standing inches from his face was a yellow square creature wearing brown pants, a red tie, and a grin that looked physically incapable of closing. The thing gasped dramatically. "Oh my gosh! You are new. I've never seen you before, and I've seen everybody because I work customer service." Rick stared. "Morty," he said cautiously. The creature tilted its head. "My name's SpongeBob SquarePants, but you can call me SpongeBob, or Sponge, or Bob, or—" Rick waved a hand, cutting him off. "Nope, not Morty. Too confident. Too aggressively happy." SpongeBob's eyes sparkled. "Thank you." A pink starfish suddenly popped up from behind Rick's ship, licking a leaking cable. The starfish said thoughtfully. "Tastes like purple." Rick spun around. What are you doing to my stabilizer?" The starfish shrugged. "I was hungry." SpongeBob gasped. "Patrick, don't eat strangers' spaceships." Rick pinched the bridge of his nose. Okay. Let's take this one step at a time." He pulled out his handheld scanner and aimed it at SpongeBob. The device whirred, then screamed, then sparked. Rick stared at the readout. "That's impossible." SpongeBob leaned closer. "What does it say?" Rick didn't answer. The scanner was showing 0 entropy decay, no molecular aging, no probability variance, not low, absent. Rick swung the scanner around, pointing it at the buildings, the sand, the fish walking by. Same result. "This universe shouldn't be stable," Rick whispered. "It shouldn't even exist." Patrick leaned in. "Is that bad?" Rick looked up at the sky, or whatever counted as sky here. "No," Rick said slowly. "It's worse." At that moment, a tall, grumpy-looking octopus marched past, dragging his feet. "Great," the octopus muttered. "Another explosion. Just what I needed." Rick instinctively fired a small laser blast at the octopus's foot. The blast vaporized the leg instantly. The octopus screamed, fell over, and exploded into ash. SpongeBob gasped. "Oh no. Squidward." Rick froze. 5 seconds passed. Then the ash reassembled. Squidward stood up, fully restored, dusting himself off. "Oh, great," he said flatly. "Now I'm late for work again." He walked away, completely unfazed. Rick's mouth hung open. He slowly turned to SpongeBob. "Did he just—" "Yeah," SpongeBob said cheerfully. "That happens sometimes." Rick stared at his gun, then at his hand, then at the universe. No scars, no trauma, no memory retention beyond mild annoyance. Rick laughed once, then again, then louder. Oh, this is beautiful," Rick said. "This is a universe with training wheels. A reality padded so thick nothing ever really breaks." SpongeBob clapped. "I like padded thing." Rick wasn't listening. His eyes had that dangerous gleam, the one that meant something was about to go very, very wrong. "All right," Rick said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's see what makes you tick, SpongeBoy." SpongeBob beamed. "Do you want to come inside my pineapple?" Rick looked at the pineapple house, then at the crack in reality, still flickering faintly beneath it. "Yeah," Rick said. "I really do." Rick stepped inside the pineapple and immediately regretted it. The interior was bigger than the outside, curved in ways that made his depth perception itch. Furniture floated slightly above the floor, swaying as if buoyant. A staircase led upward and downward at the same time, looping back into itself like a visual gag that refused to commit to geometry. Rick paused, just inside the door. "Non-Euclidean architecture," he muttered. "Of course, because why not?" SpongeBob followed behind him, wiping his feet, even though there was no dirt to wipe. "Sorry about the mess," SpongeBob said brightly. "Gary just finished shedding." A snail meowed somewhere in the distance. Rick didn't respond. He was too busy scanning the room. His device flickered erratically, unable to lock onto a consistent spatial coordinate. "This place isn't obeying dimensional continuity," Rick said. "Rooms aren't stacked. They're suggested." Patrick squeezed in behind Thom, somehow occupying more space than physics allowed. "Is this about the pineapple being alive?" Patrick asked. Rick snapped his head toward him. "The what?" SpongeBob nodded. "Oh yeah, my house grows back if it gets destroyed." Rick's scanner let out a pathetic whine and shut itself off. Rick stared at it. "You're kidding." SpongeBob shook his head enthusiastically. "Nope." Rick exhaled slowly through his nose. Okay, let's establish some ground rules." Rick snapped his fingers and deployed a small hovering drone that began mapping the interior in glowing green lines. "I ask the questions. You answer honestly. No singing. No moral lessons. No sudden musical numbers." SpongeBob raised his hand. "Yes, Rick the scientist?" Rick pointed a finger at him. "First question, do you remember yesterday?" SpongeBob blinked. "Yesterday. Like, yesterday. Yesterday." Rick sighed. "Do you retain continuous memory across days?" SpongeBob thought very hard. His face scrunched up. "I remember going to work, and making Krabby Patties, and going to work, and making Krabby Patties, and going to work." Rick cut it off. "Different days, same events." SpongeBob smiled proudly. "We're very consistent." Rick's drone suddenly froze midair, then gently drifted down and bonked into the wall, unharmed. Rick stared at it. No decay, no battery loss, no entropy curve. He turned slowly toward SpongeBob. "You don't experience time. You loop through it." Patrick clapped. "Yay! Loops!" Rick rubbed his temples. "This isn't a civilization," Rick said quietly. "It's a containment zone." That's when the ground beneath them laughed. Not metaphorically, literally. A low chuckling sound vibrated through the pineapple walls. as if the universe itself found Rick's confusion amusing. Rick stiffened. "Did you hear that?" SpongeBob nodded. "Oh yeah, that happens when people say big words." Rick's jaw tightened. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, placing it gently on the floor. The device emitted a thin, invisible wave. Rick watched the readings. Reality didn't bend. It refused. "Wow," SpongeBob said. "Is that a toy?" "No," Rick snapped. "It's a localized causality injector. It forces consequences to propagate naturally." SpongeBob tilted his head. "Oh, like when you touch a hot stove and go ow?" Rick smirked. "Exactly like that." Rick pressed the button. Nothing happened. The device blinked, confused, then powered down. Rick stared at it in disbelief. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He recalibrated it, turned it back on. Still nothing. Patrick poked it. "Maybe it's shy." Rick grabbed the device and threw it against the wall. It bounced off with a squeak and landed safely in SpongeBob's hands. "Careful," SpongeBob said. "Walls are sensitive." Rick's breathing quickened. "This universe is actively suppressing causality," Rick said. "It's cushioning reality so hard that consequences can't form." SpongeBob frowned slightly. Is that bad?" Rick looked at him. For the first time, he didn't have a quick answer. Outside, a shadow passed over the pineapple. Heavy footsteps approached. The door slammed open. "All right, who parked a UFO in my town without paying a docking fee?" A large red crab stood in the doorway, eyes narrowed, claws flexing. Rick looked him up and down. "You're a capitalist crustacean." Mr. Krabs puffed out his chest. "Entrepreneur." Rick smirked. "Even better." Mr. Krabs noticed Rick's gadgets. "Is that interdimensional tech?" he asked, eyes gleaming. "Because if it is, I'd like to discuss licensing." Rick laughed. "Oh, buddy, you don't license this. You exploit it, and then it destroys your economy." Mr. Krabs leaned closer. "I like your attitude." From outside, a tiny mechanical voice echoed. "Alert! Unregistered technology detected." Rick's eyes narrowed. "That's new." The sand outside the pineapple began to part. A small green figure emerged from a hidden hatch, piloting a crude mech. "Plankton." He scanned Rick intensely. "A being who breaks into dimensions," Plankton muttered. "Finally, someone worth stealing from." Rick grinned. "Oh, this is getting interesting." But beneath his grin, something uneasy stirred. Because for all his genius, for all his tech, this universe hadn't reacted with fear. It hadn't reacted with resistance. Well, it had reacted with indifference. And that was far more dangerous. Plankton's mech whirred softly as it stabilized itself on the sand outside SpongeBob's pineapple. The machine looked barely functional. Mismatched scrap metal, exposed wiring, a claw arm held together with duct tape. But the scanning beam sweeping across Rick's ship was sharp, precise, and hungry. Rick stepped forward instinctively, putting himself between Plankton and the wreckage. "That tech is off limits, short stack," Rick said. "It doesn't end well for people who don't understand it." Plankton's single eye narrowed. "You assume I don't understand," he replied. "I've been reverse engineering stolen technology for decades. Yours just happens to be louder." Rick raised an eyebrow. "You're self-aware. That's cute." SpongeBob leaned over to Patrick and whispered loudly, "Is this what a play looks like?" Patrick nodded. "I think Rick is the villain." Rick glanced back. "I'm not a villain. I'm an inevitability." The mech's scanners suddenly flickered. Plankton stiffened. "What did you just say?" Plankton muttered, adjusting the controls. "That shouldn't be possible." Rick smirked. Yeah, welcome to it. Plankton's mech sparked briefly, then shut down entirely, freezing mid-motion. Silence. Plankton stared at his console. No. No. This universe doesn't do interference. Rick's grin faded slightly. That's because I didn't interfere, Rick said slowly. Your universe did. Plankton turned his eye toward Rick. You're different, Plankton said. Everything else here snaps back, resets, but you don't belong to the loop. Rick didn't respond. Plankton leaned back in his mech seat, suddenly thoughtful. A foreign variable, he murmured. A destabilizing constant. Rick felt it again. That subtle pressure, like the universe leaning closer. Mr. Krabs cleared his throat loudly. So, he said, rubbing his claws together, if we're done with the science fair, let's talk business. Can your little green gadgets make me more money? Rick laughed once, sharp, bitter. Oh, you have no idea how many universes asked me that right before collapsing. Mr. Krabs' eyes gleamed. Collapsing after profit? Rick stopped smiling. You don't get it, Rick said. This place runs on narrative inertia. You can't extract value from it without breaking it. SpongeBob raised his hand again. What's narrative inertia? Rick looked at him. It's when reality keeps happening the same way because it's easier than changing, Rick said. Your universe survives because it refuses to move forward. SpongeBob frowned, really frowned this time. But moving forward is how you grow. Rick hesitated. Not always. A loud bell rang somewhere in the distance. Squidward's voice echoed faintly. I'm late. Again. Rick's eyes followed the sound, tracking it through walls that shouldn't carry noise. See? Rick said. Same events, same frustrations, same punchlines. Patrick scratched his head. I like punchlines. Rick exhaled. He turned back to his ship and knelt beside the damaged hull. The metal had dented inward, but not fractured. Rick tapped it with a wrench. No resistance at all. The ship wasn't repairing itself. It was being prevented from breaking. This universe won't let damage persist, Rick said quietly. It's not healing. It's forgetting. SpongeBob stepped closer. Is forgetting bad? He asked. Rick looked at him. Really looked at him. SpongeBob SquarePants, a being engineered by something to remain optimistic forever. Rick swallowed. Sometimes, Rick said, forgetting is mercy. The water above them darkened slightly. Not storm dark. Audience dark. Rick felt it. Eyes. He stood up abruptly. That's it. I'm done poking, Rick said. Time to poke harder. He pulled a glowing disc from his coat and slammed it into the sand beneath the pineapple. The ground shimmered. SpongeBob gasped. Is that going to hurt my house? Rick didn't answer. The disc activated. A low hum spread outward, invisible but heavy. The pineapple creaked. Reality flinched. For the first time since Rick arrived, something didn't bounce back immediately. Patrick blinked. Why do I feel weird? SpongeBob grabbed his chest. My laugh, he said softly. Why does my laugh feel heavy? Rick watched the readings spike. There it is, he whispered. Localized causality, just a taste. The colors of Bikini Bottom dulled, just a shade. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for Rick. Plankton stared at his frozen mech in horror. What have you done? Plankton demanded. Rick didn't look at him. I introduced the idea of later, Rick said, of consequences that don't reset. SpongeBob looked up at Rick, fear creeping into his voice. Rick, what happens next? Rick hesitated. For a fraction of a second, The smartest man in the multiverse didn't know the answer. Then the universe reacted, not with force, with absurdity. A sudden ukulele chord echoed from nowhere. The pineapple shook violently and spat out a jellyfish wearing a hat. The causality disc sparked, overloaded, and laughed. Rick stumbled back. "No," Rick snapped. "No, no, no, don't you dare." The universe wasn't fighting him. It was mocking him. And Rick Sanchez was starting to realize something deeply unsettling. This universe didn't fear intelligence. It neutralized it. Rick staggered back as the causality disc sputtered, its glow flickering between sickly green and bubblegum pink. The device let out a sound that was halfway between a system error and a rim shot. Then it shut off completely. Rick stared at it in disbelief. "That's not possible." SpongeBob clutched his head as a faint echo of laughter rippled through him. Delayed. Unfamiliar. "I laughed," SpongeBob said slowly. But it didn't go away. Patrick blinked several times. "I feel." After. Rick's heart pounded. The readings on his wrist device were unstable, oscillating wildly. The universe was rejecting the intrusion, but not by erasing it. By burying it under nonsense. The jellyfish wearing a hat saluted, then vanished in a puff of glitter. The pineapple walls wobbled, reshaped themselves, and settled back into cheerful curves as if embarrassed by their moment of seriousness. Rick clenched his teeth. "All right," he growled. "You want to play cute?" He yanked a cable from his ship and jammed it into the sand directly beneath the pineapple. The ground shimmered and then split. A thin crack opened in reality itself, glowing faintly green. SpongeBob stepped closer, eyes wide. "What's that?" Rick didn't look away. "That," he said, "is where I came in." Cracking slowly, pulsing like a heartbeat. And for the first time, Bikini Bottom noticed. The ocean above darkened, not naturally, but artificially, as if a spotlight had been dimmed. Buildings leaned inward ever so slightly. The streets curved toward the crack like they were listening. Mr. Krabs took a step back. "I don't like that," he said. "That's not the good kind of strange." Plankton's eye widened. "A persistent anomaly," he whispered. "You've created a continuity scar." Rick shot him a look. "Don't flatter yourself. It was already there. I just scratched it." SpongeBob knelt beside the crack, peering into it. Inside, there was no water. Just green light. Endless, spiraling green light. SpongeBob felt something tug at him. Not physically, but emotionally. Like the idea of elsewhere. "Rick," SpongeBob said softly. "This feels lonely." Rick flinched. "Don't anthropomorphize the void," Rick snapped. "It's just raw-dimensional bleed." But his voice lacked conviction. The crack pulsed again. This time, something echoed out of it. Not a sound. A tone. A familiar, tired, nihilistic frequency Rick had heard his entire life. His universe. Rick staggered back a step. "No," he muttered. "You don't get to bleed into this." The pineapple shook violently. Outside, Bikini Bottom warped, not breaking, but exaggerating itself. Colors grew brighter, shadows softened, physics loosened. The universe was turning up the cartoon. Squidward walked past the pineapple, glanced at the crack, sighed. "Of course," he muttered. This is happening today." He didn't stop. Rick watched him go. "No curiosity, no fear, no existential dread," Rick said. "It's like you're all insulated." SpongeBob stood up and faced Rick. "Maybe we're protected," SpongeBob said. Rick laughed bitterly. "Protected from what? Growth? Pain? Reality?" SpongeBob hesitated. "From becoming like you." That landed harder than Rick expected. For a moment, no one spoke. The crack widened another inch. Rick felt the pull strengthen. If it opened fully, his universe would pour in, and Bikini Bottom wouldn't survive it. Rick clenched his fists. "All right," Rick said quietly. "I get it now." He deactivated the cable. The crack shrank slightly but didn't close. Rick stared at it, unsettled. "This universe doesn't reject chaos," Rick said. "It absorbs it, smooths it out, turns it into jokes." Plankton scowled. "You make it sound superior." Rick scoffed. "Don't get cocky. It's fragile in a different way." He turned to SpongeBob. "You don't advance," Rick said. "You repeat. You reset. That's why nothing sticks." SpongeBob nodded slowly. "But we're happy," SpongeBob said dawn. Rick opened his mouth to argue, then stopped, because happiness without consequence wasn't something Rick had ever experienced. The pineapple settled. The colors stabilized. The universe relaxed, satisfied that it had pushed back enough. But the crack remained. A scar beneath the pineapple. Rick packed his tools in silence. Mr. Krabs watched carefully. "So, are you staying?" he asked. "Because we could monetize." "No," Rick cut him off. "Not yet." SpongeBob tilted his head. "You're coming back." Rick didn't answer immediately. He looked at SpongeBob, at Patrick, at Squidward disappearing into the distance, at a universe that refused to break no matter how hard he pushed. "This place doesn't need fixing," Rick finally said, "and that makes it dangerous." He stepped toward his ship. Behind him, the crack pulsed once, waiting. Rick glanced back over his shoulder. "I'll deal with you later," he muttered. The pineapple door closed. The universe exhaled. And deep beneath Bikini Bottom, something new existed. Not a villain. Not a hero. But a question. Rick didn't leave Bikini Bottom. Not really. His ship lifted off just enough to hover above the sand, cloaked behind a refracted layer of green distortion that bent light and attention away from it. To anyone looking, the wreckage beneath the pineapple was gone, the anomaly forgotten. Another strange day filed neatly into the town's endless mental recycling bin. Rick watched from above, and the longer he watched, the worse it got. Bikini Bottom wasn't stable. It was compensating. Rick activated a wide spectrum scan, sweeping the entire city. The data poured in, nonsensical and disturbing, in equal measure. Gravity vectors fluctuated by mood. Mass changed depending on comedic timing. Objects accelerated faster when no one was looking. A bus drove off a cliff, paused midair while the driver read a newspaper, then fell only after noticing the drop. Rick's jaw tightened. "This place isn't ignoring physics," Rick muttered. "It's negotiating with it." Below him, SpongeBob exited his pineapple whistling, carrying a spatula like it was a sacred artifact. As SpongeBob walked, the ground subtly reshaped itself to match his stride, smoothing out bumps before he could trip. Rick zoomed in. Preventative slapstick correction. "Unreal," Rick whispered. "The universe is actively protecting its protagonists." At the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob slipped on a puddle of grease. Rick's scanners spiked, anticipation energy. SpongeBob spun wildly, limbs flailing, and landed perfectly upright. The puddle vanished. No residue, no consequence. Rick slammed a fist against his console. "That's not luck," he said. "That's enforcement." Rick dropped a probe into the restaurant. Invisible, silent, pure, observer class. The probe watched as Squidward slammed his head into the register in frustration. Impact force, lethal. Damage sustained. 0. Squidward groaned, stood up, and continued working. Rick exhaled slowly. "This is a softlock universe," Rick said. "No fail state." The probe followed SpongeBob through his shift. Every mistake rerouted, every accident diffused. Reality bent itself into safer shapes before harm could occur. And yet, Rick's gaze drifted to the scanner feed from beneath the pineapple. The crack was still there. Small, persistent, unresolved. "Something doesn't belong," Rick muttered. "And it's not me." Rick recalibrated his instruments to detect narrative strain, stress points where the universe had to work harder to maintain its tone. Red lines appeared across Bikini Bottom. All of them converged on one location: the chum bucket. Rick smirked. Of course. Inside the chum bucket, Plankton paced in tight circles, muttering to himself. The failed mech lay in pieces behind him, stripped down to scrap. Karen's screen flickered. "You are exhibiting elevated agitation," Karen said. "I know," Plankton snapped. "That scientist. He didn't just bring technology, he brought variance." Karen paused. "That word is not native to this universe." Plankton froze. Exactly. Rick leaned back in his seat, intrigued. Plankton was feeling it too. Unlike everyone else, Plankton noticed when things didn't reset properly, when ideas lingered, when failure piled up instead of vanishing into a joke. Rick tapped his console. "Congratulations, Plankton," Rick said softly. "You're an anomaly magnet." Rick dropped another probe, this one active. The probe nudged a chair in the chum bucket, just slightly out of place. Plankton tripped over it. He fell hard, harder than anyone else ever did. Plankton screamed, not comedically. Rick's eyes widened. The chair didn't move back. Plankton lay on the floor, breathing heavily, clutching his side. Karen's screen glitched. "Damage detected," she said. "That should not have happened." Rick felt a chill. "Interesting," Rick whispered. The universe hesitated. Plankton stood up slowly, wincing. For the first time in his life, pain didn't bounce. It stuck. Plankton laughed. Not happily, not triumphantly, nervously. "It hurts," Plankton said. "Karen, it actually hurts." Karen didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was quieter. "This universe is failing to suppress consequence in your vicinity." Rick's scanners lit up. Narrative strain at maximum. The universe had chosen its pressure valve. And it wasn't Rick. It was Plankton. Rick sat forward. "All right," Rick said. "Now we're getting somewhere." Above Bikini Bottom, the water shimmered faintly, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Rick was. The town carried on, laughing, working, resetting. But underneath the slapstick surface, something had changed. Physics wasn't broken. It was tired. And for the first time, it was slipping. Plankton didn't sleep that night. Not because he was afraid. Because for the first time in his life, sleep felt optional. He lay on the cold metal floor of the chum bucket, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over again. The fall, the pain, the way it hadn't vanished the second after it happened. Pain wasn't supposed to linger. Pain was supposed to be funny. But this hadn't been funny. Karen's screen glowed dimly above him. "You are exhibiting elevated cognitive activity," Karen said. "Your thoughts are looping." Plankton clenched his tiny fists. "No," he whispered. "They're progressing." Across Bikini Bottom, Rick watched the chum bucket feed with intense focus. His scanners showed something he'd never seen in this universe before: persistence. Plankton's injury hadn't reset. The chair was still out of place. The floor still scuffed. "This is it," Rick muttered. "This is where the universe starts sweating." Rick launched a new type of probe. Not physical, not observational, but conceptual. It injected a simple idea into the surrounding space. What if this moment mattered? The universe resisted immediately. Laugh tracks surged faintly in the background of reality itself. Colors brightened. A random gag unfolded 3 blocks away, involving a fish slipping on nothing. But near the chum bucket, nothing corrected. Rick grinned darkly. "Congratulations, Plankton," Rick said. "You've become narratively inconvenient." Inside the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob flipped patties with his usual enthusiasm. But something was off. The spatula felt heavier. Not physically, emotionally. When he missed a flip, the patty hit the grill and burned slightly. SpongeBob stared at it. Burned patties didn't exist. He scraped it off cautiously. "Squidward?" SpongeBob asked. "Do patties usually smell like this?" Squidward didn't look up. "They smell like disappointment," he muttered. "Like everything else here." Rick's sensors spiked. Squidward's tone had shifted, just barely. Less exaggerated. Less cyclical. "Uh-oh," Rick whispered. "Secondary awareness bleed." The universe trembled. Not violently. Like a muscle twitch. At the chum bucket, Plankton stood before Karen, trembling with excitement and fear. "Karen," he said, "run diagnostics on me." Karen paused. "That request is illogical," she said. "You reset daily." Plankton smiled. "That's what I want to test." Karen complied. Her screen filled with scrolling data, then froze. "Error," Karen said quietly. "Your emotional state has exceeded standard parameters." Plankton laughed again, sharper this time. "I'm changing," he said. "I can feel it." Rick leaned closer to his display. Plankton's anomaly radius had expanded. Objects near him were starting to obey real physics. Inertia, friction, consequence. But only near him. The rest of Bikini Bottom continued looping happily, oblivious. "This is bad," Rick said softly. "Localized realism in a cartoon universe creates stress fractures." He watched as Plankton picked up a metal bolt and dropped it. It fell, hit the floor, and stayed there. No bounce, no gag. Plankton stared at it like it was a holy relic. "This is it," Plankton whispered. "This is how I win." Above them all, the water shimmered again, stronger this time. Reality compensated. A musical number erupted 2 streets away, loud and pointless, flooding the area with cheer. But it didn't reach the chum bucket. The song ended abruptly. Rick's eyes widened. "The universe is diverting resources," Rick said. "It's prioritizing tone control elsewhere." SpongeBob suddenly stopped mid-step on his way home. He frowned. "Why do my feet feel tired?" he asked no one. Rick's screen lit up red. Global narrative load increasing. Rick leaned back slowly. "Oh," he said, "this is gonna hurt." SpongeBob stood outside the Krusty Krab long after his shift ended. The sun, or whatever qualified as the sun in Bikini Bottom, hung frozen in its cheerful position, refusing to dip below the horizon. Time was stalling again. Rick's scanners showed it clearly now. When emotional strain increased, the universe slowed progression to compensate. SpongeBob flexed his fingers. They felt sore. Not cartoon sore, not funny sore, just sore. He laughed reflexively, waiting for the feeling to bounce away. It didn't. "Okay," SpongeBob said to himself, forcing a smile. "That's new." Across town, Rick watched SpongeBob's biometric readout spike. "That's bad," Rick muttered. "That's very bad." Rick had seen universes fall apart before. collapse under logic paradoxes, tear themselves into probability foam. But this wasn't structural failure. This was emotional overload. Bikini Bottom was built to sustain infinite joy by refusing depth. Now, depth was leaking in. Inside the chum bucket, Plankton paced faster than ever. Every step hurt, and he loved it. Each ache reminded him that something was finally real. "I'm not resetting," Plankton whispered. "Karen, do you understand what this means?" Karen's screen flickered between responses. "It means your suffering is persistent," she said. "That is unprecedented." Plankton laughed sharply. "Suffering means stakes," he said, "and stakes mean victory." He clenched his fists. "For the first time, failure doesn't vanish. It stacks." Rick leaned forward, fingers steepled. "And there it is," he said. "The villain thesis." Rick launched another probe, this one aimed not at Plankton, but at SpongeBob. The probe nudged SpongeBob's toe against a rock. SpongeBob stumbled. He fell. Hard. Rick's breath caught. Impact registered. Skin abrasion detected. Pain response delayed, but present. SpongeBob lay there, stunned. "That wasn't funny," SpongeBob said softly. Rick closed his eyes. "Damn it." The universe reacted instantly. A nearby fish slipped on a banana peel that hadn't been there a second ago. Laughter rippled through the streets. Color saturation spiked. But SpongeBob's scrape remained. The universe hadn't fixed it. It had distracted from it. "This place is triaging," Rick said. "It can't erase consequences fast enough anymore." SpongeBob slowly pushed himself up, staring at his scraped knee. It stung. He didn't like that it stung. For the first time in his life, SpongeBob didn't know how to smile something away. Rick zoomed out his display. Narrative strain was spreading. Patrick was taking longer to forget things. Squidward's frustration was lingering. Mr. Krabs was counting money more anxiously than greed alone justified. This wasn't random. "This universe is optimized for surface emotion," Rick said, "and it's choking on depth." Plankton felt it too. The chum bucket lights flickered. "Karen," Plankton said, steadying himself, "calculate probability of permanent change." Karen paused, then answered slowly. Probability increasing. Plankton's eye widened. "So this is it," he whispered. "The moment where nothing snaps back." Rick stood up in his ship, pacing. "I can't let this keep spreading," Rick muttered. "If consequence propagates fully, this universe won't know how to survive it." Rick opened a channel. Low frequency, barely perceptible. A warning pulse. The water shimmered overhead again. This time, Bikini Bottom responded with force. The streets bent upward. Buildings exaggerated themselves. Physics loosened further. Cartoon logic surged like a fever. Rick stumbled as gravity briefly inverted, then corrected itself with a honk sound. "Cute," Rick snarled. "You're panicking." SpongeBob felt it. The world around him felt louder, brighter, forced. Like it was trying too hard. "Why is everything yelling?" SpongeBob asked Patrick, who was staring at his own hands. "I can't remember why I forgot something," Patrick said slowly. That scared SpongeBob more than the pain. Rick slammed a hand against his console. "This is unsustainable," he said. "Either the universe reasserts the loop, or it breaks." Plankton stood in the center of the chum bucket, trembling. "Karen," he said, "I think I can feel the universe watching me." Karen's screen dimmed. "That sensation is mutual." Rick's scanners screamed. Plankton's anomaly radius doubled. Reality bent inward. "This is it," Rick said quietly. "The fulcrum." Above Bikini Bottom, the water darkened, not as compensation, but his attention. For the first time since Rick arrived, the universe wasn't joking. It was deciding. Rick had seen universes scream before. This one whimpered. The tremor rippling through Bikini Bottom wasn't violent. It was restrained, exhausted, like a reality trying desperately not to lose its composure. Buildings wobbled, but corrected themselves mid-wobble. The sky flickered brighter, then softer, as if unsure which tone to settle on. Rick's scanners blared warning after warning. Narrative load critical, causality leak uncontained. Rick wiped his face with his sleeve. "All right," he muttered. "You've had your fun." Below him, SpongeBob sat on a curb, staring at his scraped knee. He pressed a finger against it gently, flinched, then pulled his hand back. "That still hurts," SpongeBob whispered. The word still echoed louder than it should have. Rick clenched his jaw. That word shouldn't exist here. At the chum bucket, Plankton stood upright despite the pain shooting through his body. Sweat, real sweat, beaded on his tiny frame. Every breath reminded him that what he felt wasn't temporary, and he had never felt more alive. "Karen," Plankton said, voice shaking with excitement. "Do you understand what I've become?" Karen hesitated longer than usual. "You have become a point of narrative density," she said. "The universe must now account for you." Plankton laughed, a raw, unpolished sound. "I matter," he said. "For the first time, I matter." Rick slammed his fist into his console. "And that's the problem," Rick growled. "You matter too much." Rick initiated a hard scan, one he'd been avoiding. A full structural read of Bikini Bottom's reality engine. What he saw made his blood run cold. There was no governing intelligence. No hidden god. No master control system. Just momentum. Bikini Bottom survived because it never accumulated weight. Every emotion, every failure, every loss evaporated before it could sink in. Now that weight was piling up. "This universe isn't built to process consequence," Rick said quietly. "It doesn't know how." The ground beneath SpongeBob cracked slightly. Not a dramatic fissure, just a thin line in the pavement. SpongeBob noticed it immediately. "That wasn't there yesterday," he said. Rick's breath hitched. Memory. Comparison. Continuity. "Damn it," Rick whispered. Patrick approached SpongeBob slowly. "I think I forgot how to forget," Patrick said. SpongeBob looked up at him, eyes wide. That scared him more than the pain. Rick made a decision. He opened a channel, this time not to the universe, but to SpongeBob. The air beside SpongeBob shimmered, and Rick's hologram flickered into existence. SpongeBob gasped. "Oh, hi, Rick." Rick didn't smile. "SpongeBob," Rick said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully." SpongeBob nodded. "This place works because you don't carry weight," Rick continued. "Because you let things go before they dig in." SpongeBob looked down at his knee. "But what if I don't want to?" SpongeBob asked. Rick swallowed. "Then this universe breaks." Plankton's anomaly flared again. The chum bucket light shattered. Real glass. Real shards. Plankton screamed as one cut his arm. He stared at the blood. Blood that didn't vanish. Blood that didn't reset. "Yes," Plankton whispered. "Yes." Rick's scanners went berserk. "All right," Rick snapped. "That's it." Rick disengaged his cloak and descended rapidly, landing hard in the sand between the chum bucket and SpongeBob's pineapple. The impact cracked the ground, and this time, it didn't fix itself. Everyone froze. Rick stood up slowly. "This ends now," Rick said. Plankton turned toward him, eye blazing. You did this, Plankton accused. You showed me that pain means power. Rick nodded once. Yeah, Rick said, and now I'm taking it back. Rick pulled out a device, larger than the others, humming with unstable energy. A narrative dampener. SpongeBob stared at it. What does that do? SpongeBob asked. Rick hesitated. It makes things lighter again, Rick said. SpongeBob's smile flickered. But what about the stuff we felt? SpongeBob asked. Does that go away too? Rick didn't answer immediately, because that was the part he hated. Rick activated the device. A wave pulsed outward, not destructive, not flashy. Gentle. The world softened. Colors returned full saturation. Edges rounded. Gravity relaxed. Plankton collapsed as the pain dulled, his blood evaporating into slapstick sparkles. No! Plankton shouted. Don't take it away! Karen's screen dimmed. Reset protocols, reasserting, she said softly. The crack beneath the pineapple stabilized, but did not close. SpongeBob felt the ache in his knee fade. He stood up slowly. He laughed, his normal laugh. But it came a second late. Rick watched him carefully. Did it work? Rick asked. SpongeBob smiled. I feel okay, he said. Rick turned away. Behind him, Bikini Bottom resumed its rhythm. Loops reformed. Consequences thinned. Physics sighed in relief. But something had changed. The crack remained. And deep inside SpongeBob's mind, buried beneath the laughter, was the memory of pain. Waiting. Rick Sanchez hated variables he couldn't dominate. And Bikini Bottom was full of them. The narrative dampener hummed quietly beneath Rick's coat as he walked through the streets of the town, eyes scanning everything, trusting nothing. On the surface, the universe had stabilized. Colors were bright again. Physics had relaxed back into its familiar rubbery shape. Fish slipped, bounced, laughed, and forgot. But Rick could still see it. The lag. A half-second delay between cause and effect. A hesitation before the universe decided how funny something was supposed to be. This place didn't reset, Rick muttered. It compromised. He passed by SpongeBob, who was polishing the windows of the Krusty Krab with exaggerated cheer. SpongeBob waved energetically. Hi, Rick. Beautiful day, huh? Rick paused. SpongeBob's smile was back, but it wasn't seamless anymore. It came with effort, with intention. Rick's scanner confirmed it. Micro-latency in emotional response. That shouldn't exist here. Rick turned away before SpongeBob could ask questions. Inside the chum bucket, Plankton sat silently on a crate, staring at the floor. The injury on his arm was gone, but the memory of it wasn't. His body had reset. His mind hadn't. Karen's screen flickered softly. You are unusually quiet, Karen observed. Plankton didn't look up. I remember what it felt like, he said, and I remember losing it. Karen paused. That memory is inconsistent with baseline behavior. Plankton smiled faintly. So am I. Rick watched through a hidden feed, unease crawling up his spine. Plankton hadn't reverted. He had adapted. This is what happens when absurdity collides with intelligence, Rick said quietly. Something slips through. Rick returned to his ship and began building. Not weapons. Counters. He deployed logic anchors, devices designed to enforce consistent cause and effect chains in small localized areas. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make reality hesitate before snapping back into nonsense. The first anchor activated near a street corner. A fish tripped. He fell and stayed down. An extra second. People laughed, but the laugh came late. Rick exhaled. That's the fracture. The universe responded immediately. A marching band appeared out of nowhere, blaring music, filling the street with noise and color. Confetti rained from above. The fallen fish bounced up unharmed, waving to the crowd. Rick clenched his fists. "Every time I add logic, you drown it in spectacle," Rick snarled. "You're terrified of silence." The universe didn't answer. It never did. Rick moved the anchors closer together, forming a loose grid across Bikini Bottom. The effect compounded. Small things started persisting. Footprints lingered longer. Scuff marks didn't vanish instantly, he shrieked. Conversations carried over into the next day. SpongeBob noticed first. "Hey, Squidward," SpongeBob said one morning. "Remember yesterday when you yelled at me?" Squidward blinked. "Yes." They both froze. That wasn't supposed to happen. Squidward felt it too, a heaviness behind his eyes, a weight that didn't evaporate into sarcasm. "I don't like this," Squidward muttered. Rick watched the exchange from afar, heart sinking. "You're not built for memory," Rick said. "None of you are." But the absurdity pushed back. Harder this time. Gravity inverted briefly across town. People floated, laughed, then snapped back to the ground unharmed. Musical numbers erupted spontaneously, overlapping and canceling each other out in chaotic cheer. Rick staggered as his anchors overloaded. "Stop compensating!" Rick shouted at no one. "You're making it worse." The universe didn't care. Absurdity wasn't a defense mechanism. It was the operating system. SpongeBob stood alone outside his pineapple that night, staring at the crack beneath it. It pulsed faintly, like a sleeping eye. Rick joined him silently. For a moment, neither spoke. "You know," SpongeBob said slowly, "I keep thinking about that day I got hurt." Rick stiffened. "That shouldn't be happening," Rick said. "I know," SpongeBob replied. "But I also keep thinking about how it stopped hurting." Rick frowned. "That's good," Rick said. "That means the dampener's working." SpongeBob shook his head. "No," he said. "It means I missed something." Rick turned to him sharply. "Missed what?" SpongeBob searched for the words. "I don't know," he said, "but it felt important." Rick felt something twist in his chest. That was the danger. Not pain. Meaning. "This universe survives by staying shallow," Rick said quietly. "Depth kills it." SpongeBob looked up at him. "Or maybe depth just scares it," SpongeBob said. Rick didn't reply. Because for the first time since arriving, he wasn't sure SpongeBob was wrong. And, deep beneath them, the crack beneath the pineapple pulsed again, stronger this time. Not reacting to Rick's genius, reacting to understanding. Rick stayed crouched beside the pulsing crack beneath the pineapple, eyes scanning the subtle distortions in the air. Light bent unnaturally, but it wasn't chaotic. At least, not the chaotic he was used to. This was adaptive chaos, intelligence disguised as slapstick. Rick muttered under his breath, "It's not resisting me. It's studying me." SpongeBob shifted nervously. "Studying you. But it's just a universe, right?" Rick snorted. "Universe my ass. This thing isn't running on physics, it's running on expectation, and expectation is reactive." SpongeBob tilted his head. "Reactive?" Rick sighed. "It watches. It notices patterns. It adjusts. You try to cause something serious here, and the universe goes, 'Nope, make it funny instead.'" SpongeBob's eyes widened. "So, it knows when you're trying to be smart?" Rick pinched the bridge of his nose. "Exactly, and it's good at it." Across town, Plankton had noticed the same thing. His tiny body trembled with excitement. Pain lingered faintly in his arm from the previous encounter, a reminder of consequence. But that pain was different now. It taught him. Every misstep he made now left a trace, a memory, a mark. "I get it," Plankton whispered to Karen. "If I fail now, it sticks. And if it sticks, I can use it. Karen's screen flickered as if considering the statement. That is logical. Plankton smiled wide. For the first time, the universe wasn't just a comic strip to exploit. It was a sandbox where stakes mattered. Rick's scanners caught the change immediately. Ah, crap, Rick muttered. He's starting to exploit the loopholes I just discovered. The genius mind in the chum bucket had realized something Rick hadn't anticipated. Persistence plus unpredictability equaled leverage. Rick strode across the street, past SpongeBob's pineapple, the dampener humming faintly. Every step he took caused subtle ripples in reality, slight inconsistencies in gravity, minor delays in laughter. But the universe adjusted, smoothed them out, and then learned from them. Stop that, Rick muttered at the air. I don't experiment with the universe itself. SpongeBob frowned. It seems like it's alive. Rick paused. He'd used words like alive many times before in theoretical discussions, but here it felt literal. The adaptive feedback, the subtle timing changes, the way objects corrected themselves just slightly too late. It wasn't just cartoon logic. It was anticipatory logic. Plankton tested his newfound power. He picked up a rusted pipe and swung it at a nearby wall. Normally, the slapstick enforcement would have redirected the pipe mid-air into a harmless pratfall. This time, the pipe hit the wall. Crack. The wall wobbled. Scuffed paint flaked. For a second, the universe hesitated. Then the wall snapped back into place, mostly, but the scuff remained. Plankton laughed nervously. It can't fix everything. Rick winced. He hadn't realized that this universe, in trying to neutralize his genius, had created windows of persistence. You've got it all wrong, Rick said to himself. I didn't crack it. It cracked itself by trying to understand me. SpongeBob wandered closer to the chum bucket. What's happening over there? Rick glanced at him. Planktons. Evolving. Be careful, SpongeBob. Things that used to be jokes are starting to matter. SpongeBob tilted his head. Matter? Rick knelt, whispering as he adjusted a dial on the dampener. Yes, SpongeBob. If Plankton feels pain, if he remembers failure, if those moments persist, he can become dangerous. Not in a big, villainous way. In a clever, I'm 2 steps ahead of you at all times kind of way. Plankton threw another pipe, testing the persistence of his actions. The universe responded again, but slower this time. Adaptive chaos had learned. It had observed Rick, learned his interference patterns, and compensated. Rick's scanner went berserk. Multiple readouts spiked. Oh, holy, he's learning faster than I anticipated. SpongeBob watched Plankton, worry etched into his face. Rick, he looks stronger, but not in a scary way. Just different. Rick's hand went to his portal gun. Yeah, he's dangerous in a thinking way. The kind of dangerous that makes a universe tremble without ever touching it. And you, Rick looked at SpongeBob. You're going to notice consequences now. Real ones, tiny ones, and they'll grow. SpongeBob swallowed. Consequences? Rick's gaze flicked to the crack beneath the pineapple. It pulsed faintly. This universe can't handle it yet. Not fully. You feel weight? That's it. That's the universe telling you. Stuff actually matters now. For a moment, SpongeBob felt it. The faintest ache of tension, a flutter of discomfort in his chest. Nothing painful, nothing scary, but real, authentic, a sensation the town had never experienced before. Rick knelt beside him. Absurdity is learning from genius. Genius is adapting to absurdity, and you're in the middle of it, kid. SpongeBob looked at him, eyes wide. Am I in trouble? Rick shook his head. No, not yet, but you're about to find out what it feels like when laughter isn't enough. Across the street, Plankton held a small wrench, testing yet another micro-failure. Sparks flew. Minor damage. His grin widened. He was mastering the new rules, bending consequences to his will. Rick leaned against his ship, exhausted. I've seen universes collapse from logic overload. I've seen worlds die from paradoxes. I've never seen one crumble because it was too happy to fail. SpongeBob frowned. Too happy? Rick's eyes softened, just for a moment. Yeah, the town is optimized for cheer. Too optimized. When stakes appear, when someone like Plankton actually matters, the balance breaks. But the universe doesn't implode violently. It adjusts, slowly, painfully, absurdly. The crack beneath the pineapple pulsed stronger. SpongeBob flinched slightly. Rick noticed. This is the key, Rick whispered. This isn't about me, or Plankton. It's about the space between absurdity and consequence, and right now, you're all living there. SpongeBob looked down at the faintly glowing crack. Is it scary? Rick paused. Not yet, but it could be. And somewhere deep inside the streets of Bikini Bottom, reality paused for a heartbeat, watching, learning, adjusting. Rick watched from above as Plankton paced through the chum bucket, each step deliberate, calculated. Every movement left a trace. Every decision now mattered. He wasn't just a villain anymore. He was a variable, a tiny intelligence capable of exerting influence over absurdity itself. Rick muttered under his breath, "This is new." I didn't expect the adaptive logic to hand him agency this quickly. Plankton stopped, suddenly, eyes narrowing. He crouched over a pile of scrap metal and carefully arranged it in a pattern. Then he grabbed a wrench and struck a small panel on the wall. Sparks flew. The panel didn't reset. It stayed bent. "Yes!" Plankton shouted. "I made it stick!" Karen's screen flickered nervously. Observation. The universe is compensating. Plankton laughed, the sound shrill and triumphant. Compensating means it knows, and if it knows, I can teach it. Rick's hand clenched the dampener tightly. He could see the subtle feedback in his scanner. The adaptive chaos wasn't just reacting anymore. It was listening. Every micro-adjustment Rick had made, every countermeasure he'd deployed, was now being incorporated into the universe's logic. Shit, Rick muttered. It's learning. Fast. Meanwhile, SpongeBob walked cautiously past the chum bucket. He felt the faintest tug of consequence, like a shadow pressing against his chest. Small things started to matter. A misstep in the sand left a footprint that lingered. A dropped spatula clattered and remained in place instead of bouncing harmlessly. Rick noticed immediately. There it is. You're feeling it too. Congratulations, kid. Your universe is finally trying to hurt you. Or at least, make you notice it. SpongeBob tilted his head, confused. But why would it want to hurt me? Rick shook his head. Not hurt. Awareness. It's testing you, teaching you wait. This is what happens when genius collides with absurdity. Above, the sky shimmered faintly. The familiar cheerful blue of Bikini Bottom wavered, as if the universe were pausing to reconsider every animation cycle, every blink, every bounce. Rick frowned. It's stabilizing on higher-order outcomes. It's predicting interactions instead of just enforcing loops. The dampener in Rick's hand vibrated faintly. He had been using it to enforce local causal consistency, but now the adaptive chaos seemed to anticipate its corrections. The universe wasn't just a stage anymore. It was a participant. SpongeBob noticed something odd. The crack beneath his pineapple pulsed stronger than before, glowing faint green. It was subtle, but he could feel it like a heartbeat under his feet. "Rick, what's that?" SpongeBob asked, voice trembling slightly. Rick knelt beside him, scanning the crack. "That, SpongeBob, is the space where the universe doesn't know what to do anymore. Everything you've done, everything Plankton's done, even my little fixes, it all funnels into that crack, and it's learning from all of it." SpongeBob's eyes widened. "Learning? Like thinking?" Rick shook his head. "Not thinking, responding, adaptive feedback loops. It's absurdity with memory now. Every joke, every pratfall, it registers, adjusts, and stores. The more you interact, the more weight reality carries." At the chum bucket, Plankton had taken the next step. He positioned small metal rods in a grid, creating a miniature model of Bikini Bottom streets. Then he struck a rod with a wrench, observing how sparks traveled along the structure. Rick's eyes went wide. Oh no, he's experimenting with the logic itself. Plankton laughed. "Yes, every action I make, the universe tries to correct, but it can't correct everything. I can teach it patterns. I can create consequences that stick." Rick gritted his teeth. He realized the implications immediately. If Plankton mastered this, he wouldn't just threaten SpongeBob or the Krusty Krab. He could manipulate reality in ways Rick hadn't accounted for. SpongeBob, meanwhile, felt a growing unease. Small inconsistencies pressed at his mind. A clamshell that should have bounced remained stationary. A bubble that floated a second too long before popping. He rubbed his head. "I don't like this," SpongeBob muttered. "Everything feels different." Rick placed a hand on SpongeBob's shoulder. "Welcome to consequence. It's subtle at first, harmless, mostly. But if it grows, kid, it's going to get weird fast." Across the town, minor absurdities began self-correcting, but imperfectly. A fish slipped on a banana peel and fell, but instead of bouncing back, he paused mid-fall for a second. The delay was just enough to register panic, confusion, and awareness. Rick groaned. "Perfect. The universe is actively experimenting on emotional persistence now." SpongeBob turned toward the chum bucket. Plankton was a pow, waving his wrench triumphantly. His grin was sharp, calculated, terrifying in a small, tiny way. Rick muttered under his breath, "He's not a threat yet. But give him a week in this environment, and he'll understand that pain can be power. And this universe doesn't have the defenses for that." SpongeBob felt a faint vibration beneath his feet. The crack pulsed again, brighter now, almost like a signal. Rick's eyes narrowed. "That's it. That's the interface point. Everything unstable, everything persistent. It's feeding into that crack. And once the feedback exceeds the local adaptive threshold..." Rick trailed off, grimacing. SpongeBob shivered. "Once the..." "What?" Rick shook his head. "Once it maxes out everything you know about Bikini Bottom could glitch. Not explode, not collapse violently. Just shift. Physics, time, humor, all bending in ways nobody here can anticipate." SpongeBob swallowed. "So, you can fix it?" Rick exhaled sharply. "I can try, but the universe is learning from me now, SpongeBob. Every trick, every fix, every anchor I deploy, it's cataloged, evaluated, and adjusted around. This isn't just chaos anymore. It's responsive chaos." The crack beneath pineapple pulsed again, faintly shaking the sand. I stepped back instinctively. "Rick, it's like it's alive," he whispered. Rick's lips tightened. "Not alive. Adaptive. You don't want alive. Alive learns unpredictably. This, it learns But in rigid loops, you can exploit it if you're clever. Plankton is clever. That's why we're in trouble. Plankton, watching Rick from the chum bucket window, grinned. "You think you're the smartest here?" he muttered to himself. "Watch and learn. Universe, I will bend you, one imperfection at a time." Rick paced near the pineapple, eyes darting between the pulsing crack beneath it and the restless streets of Bikini Bottom. Every laugh, every bounce, every slapstick moment now carried a faint, uneven weight. It was subtle, just a half-second too long, a micro-frown where none should exist, but Rick felt it in his bones. "All right," Rick muttered under his breath, adjusting the dampener. "You've learned enough. Time to test the boundaries." SpongeBob hovered nearby, uneasy. "Boundaries? Rick, I don't even know what's happening anymore." Rick's gaze softened just slightly. "It's simple, kid. Absurdity has rules. Genius has rules. When they collide, you either control it or it controls you." SpongeBob swallowed nervously. "And which one is happening right now?" Rick's eyes flicked to Plankton, who was pacing inside the chum bucket like a tiny general surveying a battlefield. The minuscule villain had spent the last several hours experimenting, testing the limits of persistence and consequence. Each failed attempt at sabotage had left a trace. Every minor success reinforced the universe's adaptive loops. Rick gritted his teeth. That's the problem. He's learning exactly how this place bends, and I can't predict which way he'll push it next. Plankton raised a wrench above his head. Inspecting the gleam of light on its edge. "Yes," he muttered, voice low but thrilled. "The universe corrects itself, but only partially. And in those partial corrections lies my advantage." Rick's scanner went haywire. The micro-shifts in gravitational vectors, temporal lags, and narrative reinforcement loops were spiking at rates he'd never seen, even in some of the universes he had cataloged and abandoned. "Holy, that's not good," Rick said. "That's really not good." He knelt beside the crack beneath SpongeBob's pineapple. The faint glow pulsed in rhythmic intervals like a heartbeat. But this heartbeat wasn't steady. It throbbed faster whenever Plankton interacted with the environment. SpongeBob peered down, nervously. "It's like it's alive." Rick snorted. "I already told you, it's adaptive, not alive. But the effect is the same. You move, it reacts. You hesitate, it records. Plankton moves, it learns." Above them, the sky shimmered, not violently, but perceptibly. The familiar cheerful blue bent slightly, like a sheet of water stirred by a sudden current. Streetlights flickered, casting subtle, impossible shadows. Rick adjusted a dial on the dampener, sending a stabilizing wave through the immediate area. Most of the town's absurdity normalized. A fish that had floated midair fell gently to the sand. A bubble that had lingered too long popped as expected. Rick let out a slow breath. Good, for now. But the crack beneath the pineapple pulsed brighter, stronger, more insistent. "Rick," SpongeBob asked softly, "what happens if it keeps pulsing?" Rick's eyes narrowed. "Then the universe starts asking questions it can't answer. And questions it can't answer tend to escalate." Plankton, meanwhile, had discovered a new trick. Using scraps of metal and bits of debris, he created a tiny structure, a miniature representation of the streets around him. He struck it with his wrench, observing how sparks traveled along the miniature grid. The sparks lingered, clung to surfaces, and then dissipated, slowly, imperfectly. Rick's eyes widened. Oh crap, he's patterning the adaptive loops. He's turning the universe's own logic into leverage. Plankton laughed, a sound of sheer exhilaration. Yes, every adjustment you make, every fix you apply, every anchor you set. I understand it now. And if I understand it, I can exploit it. SpongeBob stepped closer to Rick. Exploit it? For what? Rick sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. For power, for control, and worse, for consequence. Something this universe has never had in any meaningful way. And now, he's starting to wield it. The streets of Bikini Bottom responded subtly. Footsteps left faint impressions that lingered. Minor cracks formed in the sand and hardened into shapes. Small objects, like shells and stray seaweed, remained where they fell instead of bouncing. The world was beginning to remember. SpongeBob felt it too, the faintest ache in his chest, a sensation that lingered after dropping a spatula. A misstep, a joke that fell flat. Weight, substance, reality pressing back for the first time in his life. Rick leaned over the crack beneath the pineapple, eyes scanning the pulsing light. "This is the interface," he said quietly. "The zone where all adaptive logic, all persistence, all narrative inertia meets. Everything unstable funnels here. Everything that can matter will matter here." SpongeBob glanced down, fear creeping into his usually bright eyes. "Is it going to hurt anyone?" Rick shook his head slowly. "Not yet. But once someone like Plankton learns how to push, the cracks in absurdity can teach themselves consequences. And then, SpongeBob, everyone here will feel it." Plankton raised his wrench in triumph. "Watch closely, universe. I am your variable now, your imperfection made flesh." Rick's lips tightened. He stepped back, hands hovering over the dampener. "All right, enough playtime. Either I contain this, or the universe starts rewriting itself under his control." SpongeBob shivered. Rewriting itself? Rick's gaze flicked to him, serious for the first time in a long while. Not rewriting violently, not collapsing, just bending, adjusting, making sure nothing is permanent, except now he knows how to make some things permanent. And permanence in this place is dangerous. The crack beneath the pineapple pulsed again, glowing brighter. SpongeBob flinched instinctively. Rick's eyes narrowed. "That's it," Rick whispered. "That's the threshold. We cross this line, and nothing will bounce back the way it used to." And somewhere deep inside the streets of Bikini Bottom, reality paused for a heartbeat. Not in panic, not in destruction, but in focused adaptive calculation. It had observed Rick. It had observed Plankton. And it had learned that the rules could be bent. SpongeBob looked up at Rick, wide-eyed. "So, what do we do?" Rick didn't answer immediately. He stared down at the crack, hands tightening around the dampener. For the first time, he considered that maybe some universes weren't meant to be fixed, only guided. The pulse beneath the pineapple flared again, stronger, insistent, watching, waiting. Rick whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "All right, let's see how absurd this gets." And with that, the stage was set. Rick Sanchez wasn't used to losing control. Not like this. Not here. Bikini Bottom pulsed around him like a living organism, adapting, twisting, and mocking his every attempt to impose order. The narrative dampener vibrated in his hand, humming faintly as if struggling against an unseen current. Every wave of energy he sent out was met with subtle deflection. A street lamp bent slightly out of place. A fish blinked a half-second too late. and laughter erupted where none should have been. Rick scowled. Crouching beside the pulsing crack beneath SpongeBob's pineapple, the glow was stronger than ever, an almost conscious pulse that seemed to synchronize with every absurd event in town. "This is bad," Rick muttered, adjusting the dampener. "This is really bad." SpongeBob hovered nearby, eyes wide with concern. "Rick, why does it feel like the world is watching us?" Rick didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. The universe itself was responding. Gravity flickered for a moment, inverting, then returning with a soft boing. The sand rippled beneath their feet, almost like it was breathing. Time lagged ever so slightly, just enough to make Rick flinch. "You feel that?" Rick asked, more to himself than SpongeBob. "It's not random anymore. The universe is calculating. It's reacting to me, to Plankton, to everything we do." SpongeBob swallowed. "But how? It's just a cartoon." Rick gritted his teeth. "Exactly. It's supposed to be predictable. It's supposed to ignore physics, ignore logic, ignore consequences. But now it remembers, and it's adapting." Across the street, Plankton laughed quietly to himself. Every minor experiment he had conducted had left a permanent trace. The sparks from his wrench lingered in midair slightly longer than they should have. Tiny dents and scuffs persisted in the chum bucket walls. Every misstep, every interaction, every failure, it stuck. And he had realized he could use it. "This is it," Plankton whispered, pacing. "I can make the universe obey. Partially. Imperfectly. But enough." Rick's eyes narrowed. He knew Plankton had found a dangerous leverage point. "Perfect," he muttered. "Just what I needed. A villain who understands consequence before I've finished analyzing it." The universe began to respond in a more direct way. Not catastrophically, yet, but subtly, almost experimentally. The streets themselves seemed to shift, subtly nudging Rick in one direction, then another. Cartoonish signs bent slightly toward him, their text rearranging mid-glance to mimic his thoughts. Shadows elongated, shortened, and bounced independently. Even the air seemed to ripple with a hesitant energy, like reality itself was testing him. Rick stumbled backward, his coat flaring. "All right, okay, you want to play like that?" he muttered. "Fine, let's see how you handle this." He raised the dampener and activated it, sending a controlled wave to stabilize local physics. For a moment, the town seemed to relent. A bubble popped on schedule. A fish bounced as intended. The sand stopped undulating. But then, a subtle pulse. A lag. The street lamp Rick had just corrected stretched an extra foot before snapping back. "Damn it!" Rick shouted. "It's not resisting. It's warping me. The universe is trying to predict me." SpongeBob's eyes went wide. "Warping? You?" Rick shook his head, voice low. "Not me. Exactly. My actions, my expectations. Every move I make, the universe anticipates it and responds before I finish thinking it." SpongeBob shivered. "So, it's alive?" Rick didn't answer immediately. He crouched over the pulsing crack beneath the pineapple, scanning the faint green glow. It seemed to throb in rhythm with the city's collective absurdity, synchronized to the adaptive logic that Plankton had begun exploiting. "This crack," Rick muttered. "It's like the universe's processor. It's self-aware, but in the weirdest way possible. It doesn't think like us. It doesn't plan. It feels patterns." SpongeBob stepped closer. "Feels patterns?" Rick's eyes flicked up. "Yeah, patterns. Causality patterns. Absurdity patterns. Emotional persistence. It reads loops, detects breaks, and then adjusts." He gestured to the streets. "See that fish? He tripped. Normally he'd bounce back immediately, but look, he hesitated mid-fall, 1 extra millisecond, and another. That delay? It's the universe testing me, testing my understanding of it, and it's winning. For now. Plankton grinned inside the chum bucket. He had discovered another property of persistence. Minor manipulations now had lingering effects. A misaligned pipe, a dented crate, a misplaced wrench. Each adjustment created a chain reaction in the universe. Rick's eyes narrowed. That's the problem. He's not just experimenting with objects. He's experimenting with logic itself, with consequences, with adaptive loops. The air around Rick shimmered. A streetlight bent unnaturally to face him. A bubble drifted slowly, then accelerated unnaturally, hovering just out of reach. Even SpongeBob felt it, the slight tug of anticipation in the world around him, as if reality itself were bending to observe Rick. Rick groaned. It's warping me, making me second-guess every action, every fix I try to apply, every countermeasure. It's calculating my response before I can. SpongeBob frowned. So, what do we do? Rick shook his head slowly. We survive, for now. But I need to understand the rules before this universe decides it can rewrite them without asking. The crack beneath the pineapple pulsed brighter, almost impatiently. Rick's scanners flared. Adaptive feedback from the environment, combined with Plankton's manipulations, had created a localized feedback loop capable of warping reality. And the scientist himself. Rick placed a hand on SpongeBob's shoulder, voice low but serious. This isn't just absurdity anymore. It's learning. It's watching. And if I don't keep ahead, it'll teach me lessons I don't want to learn. SpongeBob's eyes went wide. Teach you lessons. Rick's lips tightened. Yeah, the universe isn't letting me control it anymore. I have to react, adapt, survive. And I'm not good at surviving someone else's rules. Above them, the streets flickered in subtle waves. Gravity softened, then stiffened briefly. A street sign shifted letters mid-glance. Even the sand beneath their feet rippled in response to Rick's heartbeat. This is it, Rick whispered, voice grim. The cartoon is warping the scientist. Rick stumbled slightly as he adjusted the dampener. The device hummed, but its stabilizing effect was inconsistent. Every time he tried to correct minor absurdities, floating fish, delayed laughter, wobbly street signs, the universe preemptively countered. Rick's actions were anticipated, warped, and sometimes inverted before he could even finish thinking them. This is not good, Rick muttered, gripping the console tightly. It's not just adaptive anymore. It's predictive. It's responding to my intent, not my actions. SpongeBob, standing nearby, noticed the subtle distortions. Rick, things feel off. Like they're watching me, too. Rick's eyes flicked to him. Yeah, that's the point, kid.
The universe is observing patterns, and when you interact with it, it anticipates you. It's warping your expectations before they even form.
SpongeBob frowned, hesitant. So, it's trying to trick us? Rick shook his head. No, not trick. Adjust, adapt, learn. This isn't malice. It's a system responding to variables it wasn't built to handle. Plankton's interference, my fixes, even your awareness, they're all variables now, and the universe is processing them. The streets shifted subtly. A lamppost bent ever so slightly toward Rick as he walked. A school of fish swirled in a looping pattern, reversing mid-motion, hovering, then falling again. Even the sand beneath SpongeBob's feet seemed to ripple in response to his steps. like a shallow water reflection reacting to movement above. Rick's fingers tightened on the dampener. Everything I try to do, it predicts and corrects or inverts. And if I push too hard, I could destabilize it entirely. And I can't destabilize it. Not now. Plankton, meanwhile, had refined his manipulations. Using scraps of metal and debris, he had created a series of mini-structures, tiny bridges, barricades, and models of the Krusty Krab streets. He struck each with his wrench, observing how sparks traveled along the structures, how dents persisted, and how misalignments lingered. Rick's scanner spiked. Oh, great! He's patterning persistence itself. He's learning to exploit the rules of consequence I didn't even know existed. Plankton's grin widened. Yes, every imperfection I create, every chain reaction I trigger, it sticks. The universe wants to correct it, but it can't fully. And that means I have leverage, real leverage. SpongeBob shivered slightly, noticing the minor inconsistencies all around him. Footprints lingered in the sand. A drifting bubble floated longer than it should have. Small scuffs on the Krusty Krab floor remained where they landed. For the first time, SpongeBob felt a weight to his environment, an emotional persistence that had never existed before. Rick noticed it immediately. That's it. The first sign of real consequence. The universe is bending, but now it's teaching persistence. You're going to feel it, kid. Little things, but they'll grow. SpongeBob frowned. Grow? How? Rick gestured toward the pulsing crack beneath the pineapple. The green glow pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, synchronized with every adaptive adjustment the universe was making. That crack. It's the interface. All the residual absurdities, all the lingering consequences, they feed into it. And it's learning from everything. Me, Plankton, you, every action, every reaction. It's cataloging, analyzing, responding. SpongeBob's eyes widened. So, if we do something wrong? Rick shook his head. Not wrong, just consequential. The universe now keeps track of patterns. Every misstep you make, every impulsive decision, it leaves a mark. And once you leave enough marks, the universe adapts around them. That's when reality gets weird. Above them, the streets of Bikini Bottom flickered. Gravity softened, then stiffened, then returned to normal. Street signs reoriented themselves mid-glance. Even the sand shifted subtly, adjusting to footsteps after they were taken. SpongeBob felt a faint tug at his chest, a subtle pressure that was neither pain nor discomfort, but awareness, a reminder that actions now had persistent weight. Rick groaned, gripping the dampener tightly. I've seen universes collapse under paradoxes, logic loops, and causal overload, but never from sheer cartoon logic resisting a scientist. And here we are. Plankton, sensing an opportunity, began to push further. He rearranged his mini-structures and struck them again, deliberately testing how long disturbances persisted. Sparks flew, dents deepened. The universe adjusted, but imperfectly. Minor inconsistencies remained, building into a localized feedback loop. Rick's eyes went wide. That's it. That's the problem. He's bending the adaptive loops into leverage. And the universe? It's reacting, not aggressively, but intelligently. It's warping around him. And me. SpongeBob looked at the crack beneath his pineapple, trembling slightly. Rick, it's getting stronger. Rick nodded grimly. Yeah, that crack is the interface point. It's where the universe stores residual absurdities, persistent consequences, and experimental patterns. And right now, it's learning faster than I am. Every action I take, every anchor I deploy, it's cataloged, analyzed, warped. A small gust of underwater current moved through the streets, carrying with it a subtle vibration that resonated in Rick's bones. Even the dampener struggled to compensate. Rick muttered under his breath, eyes scanning the pulse. This isn't just absurdity anymore. It's adaptive absurdity. And if I don't stay ahead, it's going to teach me the wrong lessons. SpongeBob swallowed hard. Teach you lessons? Rick didn't answer immediately. He was already calculating, adjusting frequencies on the dampener, analyzing Plankton's manipulations, tracking the crack beneath the pineapple. For the first time, he considered that some universes weren't meant to be fixed, only navigated, survived. The green pulse beneath SpongeBob's pineapple flared again, stronger this time, almost like a heartbeat synchronized with the entire town. SpongeBob instinctively stepped back. Rick's eyes narrowed. "That's it," Rick whispered. "Threshold reached. If we push further, the universe won't just resist all. It'll bend around us, and I have no idea what comes next." Rick's vision flickered. Not literally. He wasn't hallucinating. But the space around him didn't behave as expected. Street lamps stretched and compressed like rubber bands. Fish mid-swim paused for imperceptible moments, then snapped forward. Shadows cast by buildings twisted independently of light sources, curling unnaturally, forming shapes that almost, but not quite, mimicked Rick himself. Rick staggered, adjusting the dampener. But it pulsed in resonance with the universe itself. Each adjustment he made was anticipated, countered, and subtly inverted. His hands felt heavier with every attempt, as though reality were adding friction to his movements. "This is not normal," Rick muttered, gritting his teeth. "The universe is warping me, and it's doing it intelligently." SpongeBob noticed the subtle change immediately. "Rick, your hands, your coat, it's bending." Rick's eyes darted down. His coat flared at unnatural angles. His lab gloves flexed oddly, as though the fabric itself were defying his commands. Even his own reflection in a nearby puddle shimmered, momentarily lagging behind his actual movements. "Yeah," Rick muttered. "It's like reality is running a simulation of me, and it's trying to correct it while I'm inside the simulation." SpongeBob took a cautious step back. "Does it hurt?" Rick shook his head. "No, not physically. But it's disorienting. My mind keeps trying to anticipate my own actions, and the universe keeps warping those expectations. It's like I'm chasing myself in real time and losing." Meanwhile, Plankton had seized the opportunity to escalate his experiments. His mini-structures, the tiny models of streets, buildings, and the chum bucket itself, had become a network of interactive tests. He would strike one section with his wrench, observe how the universe adjusted, then tweak another to create small, persistent anomalies. Sparks lingered longer than they should have. Dents didn't fully reset, and minor distortions in space propagated subtly along invisible pathways. Rick's scanner flared, warning of escalating adaptive feedback. "Oh no," Rick muttered. "He's not just experimenting with objects, he's experimenting with the rules, the adaptive loops themselves. He's teaching the universe to respond to patterns. And I'm in those patterns." SpongeBob shivered, noticing the subtle shifts around him. Footprints lingered in the sand longer than they should. A drifting bubble floated just out of reach, hesitating mid-pop. A shadow of a fish froze mid-jump, then snapped forward with a delay. For the first time, SpongeBob felt a faint weight pressing against him, an emotional persistence, like the world was suddenly aware of him. Rick's eyes narrowed. That's the key. The universe isn't just resisting me. It's warping my perception, altering my expectations, making every decision slightly wrong before I make it. And Plankton, he's using that friction to teach himself leverage. Plankton laughed, quietly, thrilled. Yes, every dent, every misalignment, every lingering spark, it all sticks. The universe tries to correct it, but it can't fully. And where it fails, I gain control. The crack beneath SpongeBob's pineapple pulsed more strongly. The green glow reflected faintly in Rick's eyes. That crack, Rick whispered. The interface point. Everything unstable, everything persistent, everything adaptive funnels into it. And now it's learning from Plankton and me. And I'm losing. SpongeBob stepped closer, trembling. Rick, it's bigger, stronger, almost alive. Rick's gaze hardened. Not alive, adaptive, pattern recognizing, self-correcting. But it feels alive because it anticipates consequences, notices inconsistencies, and reacts. And right now, it's warping me faster than I can stabilize. A gust of underwater current shifted through the street. Rick staggered as his boots met the rippling sand. Even the dampener vibrated uncontrollably, struggling to enforce local stability. SpongeBob's pineapple quivered. Streetlights bent slightly toward Rick, then snapped back. Fish paused mid-swim, suspended for imperceptible moments. Reality itself seemed to twist subtly around him. Rick clenched the dampener, voice low and tense. This isn't just adaptive chaos anymore. It's strategic adaptive chaos. It learns from my interventions, predicts them, and warps them against me. If I push too hard, I risk becoming trapped inside the feedback loops I created. SpongeBob swallowed. Trapped. Like forever? Rick shook his head, lips tight. Not forever, but long enough to realize I'm inside the universe's lesson, and it's teaching me in ways I don't like. Plankton raised his wrench triumphantly. Yes, the universe tries to correct, but I persist. I can bend its rules without breaking them completely. Rick stepped closer, voice low but sharp. Plankton, you're poking the wrong part of reality. One more misstep and the universe won't just adapt. It'll rewrite local physics around you. And I can't stop that. Not entirely. SpongeBob watched as the air shimmered. Colors shifted slightly, and the familiar cheerful streets of Bikini Bottom bent subtly out of alignment. The crack beneath his pineapple pulsed with every tiny disturbance Plankton caused. Even minor movements from SpongeBob or Rick sent ripple-like distortions through reality, tugging at the edges of perception. Rick sighed. This is the problem when genius meets absurdity. You think you're in control. But the moment the universe learns your rules, it becomes the teacher. And right now, it's tutoring me. SpongeBob felt a faint weight on his chest. The first real pressure in a town built entirely on slapstick and forgetfulness. Small mistakes now lingered. Misplaced tools didn't bounce harmlessly. Footsteps left semi-permanent impressions. Even a dropped spatula seemed to resonate, a minor echo of consequence. Rick looked down at the pulsing crack beneath the pineapple. Threshold reached, interface fully engaged. If I push harder, it'll bend. Not just me, but reality itself. And Plankton's messing with it, learning from it, creating leverage. I don't know if I can contain this without breaking something important. SpongeBob's voice was barely a whisper. Rick, what happens now? Rick exhaled slowly. Now, kid, we survive, and pray the universe doesn't decide to teach us any more lessons today. Reality around Rick had begun to fight back. Not violently, at least not in any conventional sense, but subtly, with precision. Every time he moved, the streets of Bikini Bottom shifted slightly. Gravity tugged in unexpected directions. Shadows bent independently, mimicking his actions a fraction too late. The dampener in his hands vibrated, struggling against the adaptive rhythm of the universe. Rick muttered under his breath, voice tight. It's not resisting. It's anticipating. Every action, every correction, every anchor I place. It predicts. It warps. It counters. I'm not the scientist here anymore. I'm the subject. SpongeBob stood nearby, watching the bending streets and floating fish, feeling a weight in his chest that was entirely new. Rick, it feels heavy, like I can't just goof around anymore. Rick gave him a sharp look. That's because you can't. Welcome to consequence. Welcome to persistence. Welcome to learning what it actually feels like when absurdity has memory. Plankton, meanwhile, was in full swing. His tiny metal structures had become intricate, almost architectural in design. Each strike of his wrench created residual distortions. Sparks lingered, dents deepened. Misalignments propagated across invisible pathways. Oh yeah, Plankton whispered gleefully. Every time I push, the universe bends. Every misstep I leave behind, it sticks. I can teach it. I can make consequences persist. Rick's scanner went haywire. Adaptive loops, minor gravitational anomalies, and temporal delays all spiked. Oh, this is bad, Rick muttered. He's not just learning the rules. He's exploiting the feedback mechanisms. He's turning persistence itself into leverage. And I'm in the middle of it. SpongeBob felt it too. Footprints lingered in the sand. A bubble floated midair, hesitating just slightly too long. Even the sand beneath his pineapple quivered. He stumbled slightly. Rick, I don't like this. Things, they feel wrong. Rick placed a hand on his shoulder. No, kid, you feel reality now. Small stakes, tiny consequences, and they grow. This is the first time you've actually noticed weight. And that's terrifying for a place like this, isn't it? SpongeBob nodded slowly. Yeah, terrifying. Above them, the pulsing crack beneath the pineapple flared brighter, almost impatiently. Its green light reflected in Rick's eyes, synchronizing with every minor adjustment Plankton had made. Each ripple, each bend in the environment, fed into it, creating a feedback loop of adaptive absurdity. Rick whispered under his breath, eyes narrowing. The interface. It's fully engaged. Everything unstable. Everything persistent. Everything adaptive. Flows through it. And it's learning. From me, from Plankton, from SpongeBob, from every misstep, every success, every tiny joke. Plankton waved his wrench triumphantly. Yes, imperfections persist. Minor distortions linger. And I can manipulate them. I'm teaching the universe to respond to me. I'm bending reality without breaking it. Rick groaned. He adjusted the dampener, trying to stabilize the immediate area. Street lamps snapped back upright. Bouncing fish landed correctly. The sand ceased its subtle rippling. But the relief was temporary. Even as the local space stabilized, micro-anomalies persisted. A fish hovered slightly longer than expected. A bubble paused mid-pop. A shadow stretched unnaturally. The universe isn't broken, Rick muttered. It's adaptive, strategic, teaching, warping me inside the experiment I thought I controlled. And Plankton, he's leveraging it. He's making it smarter. He's exploiting the cracks in absurdity. SpongeBob's eyes darted nervously. So, what happens if he learns too much? Rick's gaze flicked to him, sharp and serious. Then it stops being funny. Then it stops being a cartoon. Consequences start sticking. Stakes actually don't exist, and this town isn't ready for stakes, not yet. Plankton, sensing an opportunity, pushed further. He struck multiple points on his miniature structures in sequence, deliberately engineering minor residual distortions. Sparks flew, tiny dents deepened, misalignments propagated along invisible pathways. The universe adjusted imperfectly, and each imperfection persisted. Rick's eyes widened. Oh no, that's it. He's bending adaptive loops into leverage. He's learning to teach the universe his own rules, and every time he does, it warps me more. SpongeBob stepped closer to the crack beneath his pineapple, trembling. Rick, it's stronger now, almost alive. Rick shook his head. Not alive, adaptive, pattern-recognizing, self-correcting, but it feels alive because it anticipates consequences, notices inconsistencies, and warps reality. And right now, it's warping me faster than I can stabilize. A subtle ripple moved through the streets. Gravity softened, stiffened, and returned. Fish paused mid-swim, then accelerated unnaturally. Street signs bent, twisted, and returned. Even the sand beneath their feet responded to their heartbeat, as though the world were learning their rhythm. Rick clenched the dampener tightly. This isn't just adaptive chaos anymore. It's strategic adaptive chaos. Every intervention I try, the universe predicts, counters, and warps. I'm chasing myself and losing. SpongeBob swallowed hard. So, what do we do? Rick exhaled slowly. We survive. That's all we can do. Keep moving, keep observing. Don't panic, and hope the universe doesn't teach any more lessons today. The pulsing crack flared one last time, synchronized with Plankton's latest manipulations. The green glow intensified, spilling across the streets. SpongeBob instinctively stepped back. Rick's eyes narrowed. Threshold reached, Rick whispered, interface fully engaged. The universe is bending, around us, around Plankton, around everything. And if I push harder, well, let's just say nothing will bounce back the same way ever again. SpongeBob gulped. So, what happens next? Rick's eyes scanned the streets, the crack, and Plankton's gleeful figure. His lips tightened. Next, we find out how absurdity fights back when genius has no more tricks left. And kid, we're all about to get schooled. The pulse beneath the pineapple surged. The adaptive universe was awake, aware, and calculating. SpongeBob felt it pressing on him, the weight of real consequence in a place that had never known it. Rick adjusted the dampener one last time, gripping it with white-knuckled intensity. All right. Let's see how absurd this universe can really get. Rick Sanchez stood at the edge of SpongeBob's pineapple, eyes narrowing at the pulsing green crack beneath it. The universe had reached a point he had never encountered. Not in any timeline, not in any dimension, not even in the chaotic experiments he had abandoned long ago. This, Rick muttered, voice low, tense, is unprecedented. SpongeBob hovered nearby, eyes wide. The usually cheerful town was distorted, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make him feel real stakes for the first time. Shadows bent in impossible angles. Fish lingered mid-swim. Bubbles hovered, paused, then burst with slight delays. Even the sand beneath their feet quivered, as if reacting to their presence. Rick gritted his teeth. I've handled collapsing universes, time paradoxes, and multidimensional chaos, but this? He gestured vaguely at the streets. This universe that adapts, it calculates, it responds, and it's teaching me lessons I don't want to learn. SpongeBob swallowed hard. Lessons, like dangerous lessons? Rick's eyes scanned Plankton, who was pacing inside the chum bucket. The tiny villain had reached a level of mastery Rick hadn't anticipated. Using the adaptive environment, Plankton had learned to manipulate residual distortions, minor imperfections, and lingering consequences. Every strike of his wrench, every dent, every misaligned scrap persisted, creating a network of subtle leverage points. He's not just experimenting with objects, Rick muttered under his breath. He's experimenting with the universe itself, and every time he does, it warps me in response. The pulsing crack beneath the pineapple flared in response to Plankton's latest manipulations. The green light reflected in Rick's eyes, synchronized with the adaptive logic spreading through the streets. SpongeBob felt a pressure in his chest, a weight of reality he had never felt before. Rick shook his head. It's not malice. It's intelligence, absurdity, calculated, responsive, adaptive, and it doesn't care who's in charge. Not me, not Plankton, not even you, SpongeBob. SpongeBob's voice trembled. So, there's nothing we can do? Rick exhaled sharply, adjusting the dampener in his hands. We can react, we can survive, we can try to manipulate it, but full control? Forget it. This universe doesn't obey genius, kid. It adapts, it resists, it warps. And right now, it's teaching me that the rules I've relied on in every other reality don't apply here. The streets began to pulse subtly, not violently, but with a rhythm that mirrored the crack's heartbeat. Gravity softened in one alley, stiffened in another. Fish paused mid-swim, suspended for imperceptible moments. Bubbles lingered unnaturally. Shadows stretched and twisted in unpredictable ways. Even SpongeBob's own shadow moved slightly out of sync with his body. Rick's voice was tight. Every anchor I try to set, it anticipates. Every fix, it adapts around it. And Plankton, he's turning that adaptability into leverage. He's teaching the universe to respond to him, and that warps me. Every time I think I've stabilized a problem, it bends around my expectations. SpongeBob looked at the pulsing crack beneath his pineapple. It's bigger now, stronger. Rick nodded grimly. Interface fully engaged. All residual absurdities, persistent consequences, adaptive loops, they feed into it. And now it's learning from us, from Plankton, from you, from me. Every action, every reaction, every tiny step, it's cataloged, analyzed, warped. Plankton raised his wrench triumphantly. Sparks flew from his latest strike, lingering longer than they should. Minor dents deepened. Misalignments propagated subtly along the streets and buildings. He laughed, a high-pitched, gleeful sound. Yes, imperfections persist. Minor distortions linger, and I can exploit them. I can teach the universe my rules. It will bend around me. Rick's lips tightened. He adjusted the dampener, trying to stabilize the immediate area. Street lamps straightened. Fish bounced correctly. The sand settled. But it was temporary. Even as local space stabilized, micro-anomalies persisted. A fish hovered slightly longer. A bubble paused mid-pop. Shadows flickered. Rick groaned. Perfect. Plankton's exploiting the persistence loops, and every time he does, the universe anticipates, counter-adjusts, and warps me. I can't predict the next step because the universe is learning faster than I can calculate. SpongeBob felt a subtle tug in his chest. The weight of reality pressed against him. Footsteps left lasting impressions. Misplaced objects didn't bounce harmlessly. Even a dropped spatula seemed to resonate, a minor echo of consequence. Rick's eyes flicked to him. That's the thing about this place, kid. Stakes exist now. Small, growing stakes, and the universe isn't going to let you forget them. Plankton struck again. Deliberately manipulating the interface, sparks flew, dents deepened, minor distortions propagated across invisible pathways. The green glow beneath the pineapple flared in response. Rick's voice was grim. Oh no, that's it. He's bending adaptive loops into leverage, and the more he learns, the more he warps me, and the universe warps around me. I'm inside a system that anticipates every action, every countermeasure, and it doesn't care about genius. SpongeBob swallowed. So, it's smarter than you. Rick's lips tightened. Not smarter. Different. And in a place like this, different beats genius every time. I can't conquer it. I can only survive and hope it doesn't teach me the hard way. The crack pulsed again, synchronized with Plankton's manipulations. Reality itself quivered subtly, bending around their presence. SpongeBob instinctively stepped back. Rick adjusted the dampener one last time, gripping it tightly. Threshold reached, Rick whispered. The interface is fully engaged, and if I push any harder, if I try to impose more control, this universe doesn't just resist. It bends around us, around Plankton, around everything, and nothing will bounce back the same way again. SpongeBob's voice trembled. So, what happens next? Rick's gaze swept over the distorted streets, the adaptive patterns, and Plankton's gleeful figure. His lips tightened. Next, we see how absurdity fights back when genius has no tricks left. And kid, we're all about to get schooled by a universe that doesn't care about rules. The green pulse beneath the pineapples surged. SpongeBob felt the pressure of real consequence pressing against him, against the town. Rick's fingers tightened on the dampener, white-knuckled. All right, Rick muttered under his breath. Let's see how this universe really teaches lessons. And with that, the stage was set for consequences that would ripple across Bikini Bottom and beyond. Rick's pulse raced as he stepped cautiously into the streets of Bikini Bottom. Every movement he made was mirrored in subtle distortions. Streetlights bending slightly before straightening. Fish pausing mid-swim. Sand rippling beneath his boots. The adaptive universe was no longer passive. It was aware. It felt the presence of genius and villainy alike and bent reality to test, challenge, and warp them. This is insane, Rick muttered, adjusting the dampener. I've faced collapsing realities, paradoxical loops, even universes that tried to chew my brain apart, but never anything like this. This place resists me in real time. SpongeBob, floating nervously nearby, felt the strange pull of the world around him. The streets no longer felt like harmless cartoon absurdity. Footsteps left faint impressions. Bubbles lingered, hesitated, and popped unpredictably. Shadows bent and stretched, forming shapes that just almost, looked like conscious observers. Rick's eyes narrowed. The interface beneath your pineapple, kid. It's learning from every single micro-action. Every misstep I make, every adjustment I try. It catalogs, it analyzes, it responds. And Plankton, he's exploiting that. Plankton, pacing inside the chum bucket, wielded his wrench like a conductor's baton. Each strike created a ripple of persistent distortion. Sparks lingered longer than natural. Dents deepened subtly, and misalignments propagated along invisible paths through the streets. He laughed quietly, high-pitched and gleeful. Yes, Plankton squealed. Imperfections persist, minor distortions linger, and I am learning to manipulate them. I can teach the universe my rules. Rick groaned. He adjusted the dampener to stabilize the immediate area. Street lamps snapped upright. Fish landed correctly. Sand settled. But the relief was temporary. Micro-anomalies persisted. Shadows flickered independently. Bubbles hovered fractionally longer. Even SpongeBob's shadow seemed to lag slightly behind him. Rick muttered under his breath. Perfect. Plankton's not just testing objects. He's testing adaptive logic itself. And every time he does, it warps me. The universe predicts, counters, and bends around every move I make. SpongeBob shivered, feeling a pressure in his chest. Rick, I don't like this. Things feel heavy. Rick glanced at him, voice grim. Welcome to stakes, kid. Real stakes. Persistent consequences. This isn't a joke anymore. This universe remembers every micro mistake, every small success. It stores it. It adapts. And if you push it, it punishes or bends you. I'm living proof. Above them, the streets pulsed subtly with the rhythm of the interface beneath the pineapple. Gravity softened in one alley, stiffened in another. Fish paused mid-swim, suspended briefly before snapping forward. Shadows twisted, stretching into impossible angles. The sand itself shifted slightly beneath their feet. SpongeBob felt each ripple like a faint heartbeat against his chest. Rick clenched the dampener. Every intervention I try, it anticipates. Every attempt to fix something, I'd warped before I finish thinking it. And Plankton, he's turning adaptive loops into leverage. He's teaching the universe to respond to him, and that warps me even more. Plankton struck another miniature structure, sparks dancing along the interconnected metal. Dents deepened, alignments shifted, imperfections persisted. The adaptive universe reacted instantly, flowing around his manipulations like a living algorithm. "Oh, yes!" Plankton cheered. "Every imperfection sticks. Every ripple counts. And I control the lesson now." Rick groaned. He scanned the surrounding streets. Even stabilized sections were warped. Street lights tilted slightly, fish twitched mid-bounce, and sand rippled faintly. The town itself seemed conscious, bending around the influences of Plankton, Rick, and the interface beneath the pineapple. SpongeBob's eyes widened. "It's alive?" Rick shook his head. "Not alive. Adaptive, pattern recognizing, self-correcting. But it feels alive because it calculates consequences. It doesn't just react, it anticipates, warps, and tests. And right now, it's warping me faster than I can stabilize." The pulsing crack beneath the pineapple brightened. SpongeBob instinctively stepped back. Rick's fingers tightened on the dampener, white-knuckled. The interface had reached full engagement. Every residual absurdity, persistent consequence, and adaptive anomaly was feeding into it, and it was learning faster than I am. "This is it," Rick muttered. Threshold fully engaged. If I push harder, if I try to impose control, this universe doesn't resist. It bends around me, and there's nothing I can do to fully stop it. SpongeBob swallowed hard. "So, what happens if it bends too much?" Rick's gaze swept over Plankton, the distorted streets, and the pulsing crack beneath the pineapple. Then chaos becomes structured, consequence becomes persistent, and we survive the best we can. That's all. That's the game here. Plankton struck yet another model, deliberately engineering minor distortions. Sparks flew, dents deepened, and invisible alignments shifted subtly through the environment. Each action fed back into the interface. The green pulse beneath the pineapple flared in response, synchronizing with Plankton's manipulations. Rick exhaled, voice tight. Perfect. He's bending adaptive loops into leverage. He's teaching the universe his rules, and every time he does, it warps me more. And the universe, it's learning faster than I can calculate. SpongeBob felt the faint weight of consequence pressing harder. Footsteps left lasting impressions. Objects didn't bounce harmlessly. Even a dropped spatula seemed to echo with persistence. Rick's lips tightened. This is it. Genius versus adaptive absurdity. And I cannot conquer this. I can only survive. And hope it doesn't teach me any harder lessons than it already has. The crack flared once more, stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat that resonated with the entire town. SpongeBob instinctively stepped back. Rick adjusted the dampener, fingers white-knuckled, and muttered, "All right. Let's see how absurdity teaches lessons when genius has no tricks left." Rick's eyes darted across the streets, scanning every ripple, every shift, every anomaly. The universe wasn't just resisting him, it was actively countering. Each step he took bent reality in subtle but disorienting ways. Shadows stretched unnaturally. Gravity flickered in alternating patterns. Fish paused mid-swim, then accelerated unpredictably. Even the sand beneath SpongeBob's pineapple quivered in response to their movements. This isn't resistance," Rick muttered, gripping the dampener tightly. "This is anticipation, adaptive response. The universe is calculating the outcome of every micro-action I make before I make it." SpongeBob's eyes widened. "So, it knows what we're going to do?" Rick shook his head. "Not exactly know. Predict. Test. Adjust. It's not reasoning, it's learning patterns, and that makes it dangerous. Dangerous and stubbornly persistent." Plankton, inside the chum bucket, was in full control of his mini-network of distortions. Sparks flew from his wrench as he struck strategically placed structures. Each strike deepened dents, propagated misalignments, and fed residual disturbances into the adaptive loop. He cackled gleefully. "Yes, every imperfection persists, every ripple counts, and I control the lesson now. I can teach the universe to respond to me." Rick groaned. Perfect. He's exploiting persistence. Every residual distortion he creates loops back into the system, and every loop warps me. The universe calculates my reactions and bends them against me. SpongeBob felt a subtle weight pressing against him. Footsteps left impressions. Objects no longer bounced harmlessly. Even a dropped spatula seemed to echo through the streets. He shivered. "Rick, it's heavy. The world feels heavy." Rick's eyes narrowed. "That's because it is. This isn't slapstick anymore. This isn't harmless chaos. This is absurdity with memory, persistence, consequence, and right now, you're feeling the first real pressure of it." The crack beneath the pineapple flared brighter, pulsing in time with Plankton's manipulations. The streets responded. Gravity softened in one alley, stiffened in another. Streetlights tilted subtly, then straightened. Fish twitched mid-jump. Shadows shifted independently. The adaptive universe was fully engaged, bending around their actions, learning, testing, and warping reality with precision. Rick adjusted the dampener, trying to stabilize a small section of street. The attempt worked temporarily. A fish landed correctly. A bubble popped on schedule. Sand settled. But micro-anomalies persisted. Shadows flickered. Bubbles paused fractionally longer. Even SpongeBob's own shadow moved slightly out of sync. "Every intervention I try," Rick muttered under his breath, "it anticipates every fix warped before I finish thinking it. And Plankton, he's leveraging that. He's teaching the universe his rules, and that warps me more. I can't keep up with the adaptive loops he's creating." Plankton struck another mini-structure, sparks flying in arcs, dents deepening, misalignments shifting imperceptibly through the streets. He laughed, high-pitched and triumphant. "Oh, yes. Imperfections persist. I teach the universe my rules. It will bend around me. I will control everything it tries to correct." Rick groaned, scanning the adaptive anomalies. The town bent subtly around Plankton's influence, the interface beneath the pineapple amplifying every distortion. SpongeBob felt the pressure increase, a real, tangible weight pressing against him. His usually carefree environment had transformed into a world with rules, with stakes, with persistence. "Welcome to consequences, kid," Rick muttered. "Everything you touch leaves a trace now. Every misstep, every small success. The universe remembers it. And it adapts. This is how absurdity becomes dangerous." SpongeBob swallowed hard. So, I can't just be me? Rick shook his head. Not here, not now. Every impulse, every action, it leaves a mark. And if you push too hard, if you misstep, the universe will warp around it. You'll feel it. You'll pay attention. That's what Plankton's leveraging. And that's what's bending me. Above them, the green pulse beneath the pineapple surged, brighter and stronger. The streets seemed alive, bending subtly around their presence. Gravity warped unpredictably. Shadows stretched into impossible angles. Bubbles floated mid-pop, lingering in defiance of natural logic. Even the sand quivered as if aware of their steps. Rick clenched the dampener, white-knuckled, muttering, "This is absurdity fighting back, and it's winning in ways I've never accounted for. I can only survive it and adapt to it faster than it adapts to me." Plankton struck again, creating a deliberate cascade of minor distortions. Sparks lingered. Dents propagated through invisible pathways. Micro-anomalies reinforced each other. The interface beneath the pineapple flared violently in response, synchronizing with the adaptive loops Plankton had created. Rick exhaled slowly. This is why I hate adaptive absurdity. It doesn't care about genius. It doesn't care about strategy. It only cares about patterns, persistence, and leverage. And Plankton, he's exploiting it perfectly. SpongeBob's eyes widened as he felt the world pressing against him. Footsteps left lasting impressions. Objects didn't behave as expected. Even the faint echo of a spatula hitting the ground felt like consequence. Rick's voice was tight, controlled. Genius versus adaptive absurdity. And genius loses. You don't conquer this. You survive it. You bend as it bends and hope it doesn't break you first. The green pulse beneath the pineapple surged, illuminating the distorted streets. SpongeBob instinctively stepped back. Rick's hands tightened on the dampener. "All right," Rick muttered under his breath. "Let's see how this universe teaches lessons when genius has no tricks left." Rick's vision flickered as reality itself bent in response to his presence. The streets of Bikini Bottom twisted, not violently, but subtly, intelligently. Gravity fluctuated unpredictably, shadows stretched an impossible way, and fish paused mid-swim before snapping forward. Even the sand beneath the pineapple quivered, as though aware of every step they took. Rick muttered under his breath, fingers gripping the dampener with white-knuckled intensity. This is beyond adaptive logic. This is absurdity, calculating consequences. It's learning from me, from Plankton, from SpongeBob, and it doesn't care what I think I know. SpongeBob's voice trembled. Rick, it's heavy. I can feel it. Everything we do sticks. Rick's eyes narrowed. That's because it does. Every misstep, every adjustment, every small success leaves a trace. And the universe, it's teaching persistence. It's making consequence tangible. Welcome to a town that remembers. And right now, kid, it's testing me harder than anything I've faced. Plankton, meanwhile, had fully embraced his advantage. His network of mini-structures acted like a conductor's sheet music. Each strike of his wrench generated sparks that lingered unnaturally, dents that deepened over time, and misalignments that propagated invisibly through the streets. Every residual anomaly reinforced itself through the adaptive loops. "Oh, yes," Plankton squealed triumphantly. "Imperfections persist, every ripple counts, and I am in control. I teach the universe my rules." Rick groaned. "Perfect. He's not just testing objects, he's exploiting the system itself. And every time he does, it warps me. Every loop, every adaptation, it's learning faster than I can calculate. The crack beneath SpongeBob's pineapple pulsed violently. The green glow reflected in Rick's eyes. The streets themselves bent subtly, bending around the three of them like an elastic plane. Gravity softened in one alley, stiffened in another. Shadows twisted into impossible geometries. Even the sand quivered in a rhythm that mirrored the interface's pulse. SpongeBob felt the weight of consequence pressing on him. Footsteps left impressions. Objects did not bounce harmlessly. Even a dropped spatula resonated with faint persistence. Rick, it's everywhere. I can feel it pressing on me. Rick's lips tightened. Exactly. This is absurdity fighting back. And in a place like this, it doesn't care about genius. It only cares about patterns, persistence, and leverage. And Plankton, he's exploiting it perfectly. Plankton struck yet another model deliberately, creating a cascade of distortions. Sparks flew, dents propagated through invisible pathways, micro-anomalies reinforced each other. The green pulse beneath the pineapple flared violently in response, synchronized with the adaptive loops Plankton had engineered. Rick adjusted the dampener, trying to stabilize a small section of street. The effect was temporary. Fish landed correctly, bubbles popped on schedule, sand settled, but micro-anomalies persisted, shadows flickered, bubbles lingered fractionally longer, and even SpongeBob's shadow moved slightly out of sync with him. Rick exhaled slowly. Genius versus adaptive absurdity. And genius loses. You don't conquer this. You survive it. You bend as it bends, and hope it doesn't break you first. SpongeBob swallowed, trembling. So, we just survive? Rick's eyes scanned Plankton, the distorted streets, and the pulsing crack beneath the pineapple. For now, that's all we can do. Every action has weight. Every micro-mistake persists, and if we push too hard, the universe will rewrite around us. Above them, the green pulse surged, illuminating the warped streets in an eerie glow. Rick's hands tightened on the dampener. SpongeBob felt the pressure of consequence intensify. Even Plankton seemed to pause, caught in the interface's oscillating pulse, marveling at his own leverage. This, Rick muttered, voice low, is why some universes aren't meant to be conquered. They adapt faster than genius can calculate, anticipate faster than strategy can respond, and warp reality in ways that leave lasting consequences. And this is one of them. The interface pulsed again, almost like a heartbeat, resonating through the streets. Fish twitched mid-swim. Shadows bent unnaturally. Gravity fluctuated subtly. Bubbles lingered mid-air. Every micro-action echoed, leaving persistence in its wake. SpongeBob felt the full weight of a world with rules that could no longer be ignored. Plankton, sensing the climax of his leverage, struck the last key structure in his network. Sparks flew, dents deepened, minor distortions propagated. The green pulse beneath the pineapple flared violently, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to shiver. Rick's voice was tight. That's it. Threshold breached. The interface is fully engaged. The universe is no longer reacting. It's calculating, bending, and teaching all at once. And there's nothing I can do to stop it completely. SpongeBob's chest tightened. So, this is it? Rick nodded grimly. Yeah, this is it. Absurdity that adapts, patterns that persist, a universe that resists genius. And if we survive it, we come out different, smarter, slower, aware of stakes we never had before. And kid, that's what makes this lesson brutal. The green pulse flared one final time. SpongeBob instinctively stepped back. Rick's fingers tightened. Plankton's triumphant grin widened. And in that moment, the adaptive absurdity of Bikini Bottom reached its full potential, teaching, warping, and reshaping reality around its inhabitants. Rick exhaled, voice low but resolute. All right. Let's see what happens when a universe decides it won't be conquered. And let's hope we survive the lesson it teaches. For SpongeBob, the weight of consequence pressed fully upon him. Every joke, every small mishap, every movement, persistent, tangible, irrevocable. This was a Bikini Bottom unlike any before. And for Rick, the genius who had conquered countless worlds, this was a universe he could not dominate. The interface pulsed again. The streets shimmered. The lesson had begun.